The day Isabella and I finalized our divorce, I left for my hometown. My suitcase held little more than a simple linen shirt and an old watch I was fond of. On my way out, I stopped in the garden and plucked a single blooming rose. It felt fitting, as that was all I had with me when I first arrived in this city. The estate's longtime butler watched me with wary eyes, as if he expected me to pocket the silverware on my way out. Miss Clara has her business school classes today, and Master Miles is at his international school, he offered, his voice stiff. If you'd like to see them one last time. There's no need for that, I said, my voice softer than it had been in years. Don't let something like this disrupt their studies. For the last time, I walked out, my suitcase rolling behind me as I passed through the series of grand doors. The sky was gray, and a restless wind was blowing, but with every door I passed, the sun seemed to fight its way through the clouds. I found myself moving toward the light, my steps feeling faster and less heavy. As I stepped through the main gate, I glanced back at the old butler. A small, genuine smile spread across my face, one I was sure he hadn't seen in a very long time. Please tell Isabella Hayes that as of today, Leo Miller is gone from her life. We won't be seeing each other again. After leaving the Hayes estate, I stood on the bustling street corner and felt a momentary sense of being lost. In the 5 years I had been married into that wealthy family, I had barely taken a step outside the mansion by myself. My life in that luxurious prison had nearly cut me off from the real world. I was grateful it had only been 5 years. A decade or two might have broken me completely. I found a decent hotel and went to check in, placing my credit card on the counter. I need to get south, back to my hometown. Do you have any recommendations? I asked the front desk clerk. He took the card, raising an eyebrow slightly. Traveling by yourself, sir? That's quite bold. I managed a small smile. A hotel in the most expensive part of New York was bound to have staff who were well-informed and connected. Driving alone is risky, the clerk said. If you want to travel safely, your best options are by train or plane. There are direct flights heading south every day. If you have the money, getting a ticket is easy enough. I had money, but my budget was limited. If I spent it all on this trip, I'd have nothing left when I got home. After a moment of consideration, I took a finely carved jade pendant from my pocket. The clerk's eyes widened when he saw it. I'll trade you this pendant for 2 things, I said. First, a plane ticket to my hometown. Second, you guarantee my safety until I'm on that plane. The last flight south had already departed the day before, and the next one wasn't scheduled for another 24 hours. The morning passed quietly, but the afternoon descended into chaos. I pushed open my window a crack and looked down at the street below, which was swarming with police cars. In the 3 years since Isabella had taken full control of her family's corporation, New York had been remarkably peaceful. The mayor had even given her public praise for it at the last city gala. Later, when a room service attendant brought my dinner, he gave me a quiet warning. Something big must be going on. The police have started a citywide manhunt. The manager specifically told me to ask you not to leave your room, sir. He'll have a car ready to take you to the airport first thing in the morning. That night, even with the door locked and the window shut, the sound of wailing police sirens managed to seep through the glass. I figured Isabella must have run into some kind of major crisis. But she was brilliant, always calm under pressure. She was a master planner who always had everything under control, her heart and mind as sharp and cold as ice. She was the perfect corporate titan. That's who she was meant to be. The next day, just as the sun was beginning to rise, I was in the car the hotel had provided. As we were leaving the city limits, the driver slipped the traffic officer some cash, and our car slowly merged onto the expressway heading toward the airport. From inside the car, I thought I heard the loud blare of a horn from somewhere nearby. "Don't worry, sir," the driver said, leaning closer to the window and lowering his voice. "The city just announced a full lockdown, but we're already clear. We'll be at the airport in no time." A light rain began to fall as I got out of the car. I had my ticket, went through security without any problems, and boarded the plane. The price for the presidential suite was steep enough to make me hesitate, but I swiped my card anyway. A flight attendant politely guided me to my room. While it was nothing compared to the Hayes estate, it was still luxurious and comfortable. The sound of a helicopter roaring somewhere outside drew my attention, and I could hear a commotion from the crowd on the tarmac below. I couldn't resist pulling back the curtain to look out at the rain-swept city skyline, one last time. 5 years ago, I had come to this massive city full of hopes and dreams. Now, all I felt was a quiet indifference. Just as I was about to close the curtain, I saw a lone figure sprinting through the rain. In a downpour that heavy, they must have been soaked through. I didn't know who they were running after, but it was already too late. I returned to my small, quiet hometown. With the money I had left, I bought a small apartment with a view of a lake. The furniture was simple, the layout was comfortable, and the balcony was filled with green, leafy plants. I rediscovered my old dream of becoming a doctor, working at a local clinic during the day, and spending my nights studying medical journals. One day, after finishing my shift, I found a young boy lying in the community garden covered in blood. He had deep cuts on his arms, legs, and stomach. He was close to death, but his breathing was faint. Luckily, I had my first aid kit with me. After I bandaged his wounds to stop the bleeding, I rushed him to the hospital. I honestly thought his injuries were too severe for him to survive. But after 7 full days and nights in intensive care, he finally opened his eyes on the morning of the 8th day. His eyes were dark and clear, like a deep pool of water, pure and without a single flaw. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice weak. Then he mumbled to himself, "Where's my mom? Who am I?" From that day forward, a boy who I named Sam came to live in my apartment. Having fought his way back from the edge of death, Sam had the resilience of a wolf. The two of us, an orphan with no memory of his past, and a single father who was new in town, naturally became a topic of local gossip. Compared to the life I had lived at the Hayes mansion, these small-town rumors were nothing. But Sam refused to tolerate any of it. One evening, while I was in the shower, I heard a commotion outside, followed by a cry of pain. I quickly got out to see Sam holding a mop handle, teaching a lesson to a drunk man who had been shouting insults. From that day on, whenever I took a shower, he would pull up a small stool and sit right outside the bathroom door. "Dad, you're not by yourself. I can protect you," he would say. Sam would wake up before sunrise every day to cook breakfast for me, clean the apartment, and water the plants on the balcony. He would wait for the sun to be fully up before gently waking me for my meal. He'd take leftovers and turn them into delicious meals to feed the stray cats that lived downstairs. He built them a small shelter from old cardboard boxes and would even use an old towel to wipe them clean. "You don't have to do all this," I told him once. "I'm the dad." "Exactly, because you're my dad," Sam said, placing a peeled egg in my bowl as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's normal for a son to take care of his father." I thought of my own son and daughter, so far away in New York. They had been sent to be raised by their grandmother the moment they were born. They only saw me on my birthday for a brief, formal visit, their every action a perfectly rehearsed display of high society etiquette, always distant and cold. I split the egg in half and put a piece in his bowl. "It's also natural for a father to take care of his son," I said. Seeing me smile, Sam lowered his head and ate his half of the egg in a single bite. Soon after, I enrolled Sam in the local school. The public school had its share of troublemakers, but Sam was different. He always sat perfectly straight in his chair and focused on his studies. His homeroom teacher, impressed by how mature he was, often asked him to stay after school for some extra tutoring. One day, after a particularly heavy snowfall, I was worried about him walking home, so I drove to the school to pick him up. As I got to the school gate, I heard his teacher ask him, "How do you stay so focused and diligent?" Sam's voice was young but steady. "I know I'm not his real son, but Dad is raising me all by himself, and he's more of a father to me than any biological parent could ever be. If I don't achieve something and give him a good life, how could I ever repay him for everything?" I looked up at the snowflakes falling from the sky. The air was freezing, but my heart felt incredibly warm. The years passed quickly. Sam went from the local elementary school to one of the best middle schools in the region. Thanks to his outstanding grades, he earned a full scholarship. Every weekend, Sam would come home from his boarding school. "Dad, I got first place again in last week's monthly exam. That makes it 7 times in a row. The principal said a big company is coming soon to select a few exceptional students for an elite training program, and my name is on the list. He wants you to come to the school to talk about it." This was wonderful news. After the weekend, I went with Sam to the school. The principal was incredibly polite, praising Sam endlessly, calling him brilliant, intelligent, and saying he had a limitless future. The recruiter this time is the head of a top-tier institution. They've scouted at our school for 3 years in a row, but have never chosen a single student. They don't just look at academic performance, they also evaluate the parent's character. For Sam's future, I hope you'll handle this meeting well, Mr. Miller. I nodded and followed the principal to the conference room door. The principal leaned in and whispered at the entrance, "Ma'am, Sam Miller's father is here." The double doors swung open. I straightened my shirt and walked in slowly. "Hello, I'm Leo Miller." As I was about to offer my hand for a handshake, I heard a sharp gasp and the sound of a glass shattering on the floor. I instinctively looked up and my eyes met a very familiar gaze. There was confusion, then shock, and then a long, unending silence. I had thought we would never cross paths again, but I never imagined we would meet like this. She had lost some weight. Her figure was leaner, her face was thinner, and the sharp intelligence in her eyes was even more intense. She walked toward me, one step at a time, her jaw set in a tight, beautiful line, her dark eyes looking slightly red around the edges. I lowered my gaze, taking on the submissive posture I was supposed to. A common man, a powerful female CEO. It was only right. It was how things were supposed to be. "Leo Miller!" Isabella's voice was strained, filled with something that sounded like resentment. Or maybe it was pain, as she forced my name out. Joy, anger, sorrow, happiness. So she was capable of feeling anger, after all. Isabella and I were from different worlds, like the sky and the earth. Years ago, the Hayes Corporation had been on the verge of going bankrupt, and it was my father who saved it. The Hayes family matriarch, deeply grateful for his help, gave him a significant stake in the company as a promise that she would repay the favor one day. Because my father had helped the Hayes family, he was targeted by their business rivals. Before he died, he told me to go north to New York City and ask for their protection. After a difficult and dangerous journey, I finally made it to the Hayes headquarters. When the matriarch learned that my father had died because of her, she wept and said she owed him a debt she could never repay. Since I had just graduated from college and had no one to rely on, she felt the only way to repay my father was to promise me a stable and peaceful life by arranging a marriage. And so she had me meet Isabella. On a cold winter day, I stood in the company's main lobby and saw an elegant figure walking toward me from a distance. Snow was falling gently outside. She was wearing a black trench coat. Her posture was tall and proud, and she had an aura that was both cold and commanding. Seeing Isabella for the first time was like seeing a majestic hawk soaring through a snowstorm. It was impossible not to fall for someone so magnificent, but I knew we didn't belong in the same world. I turned down the matriarch's offer and suggested that some startup capital and a small house in New York would be more than enough to repay the debt. I had studied medicine with my father since I was a child, and had my own ambitions. A peaceful life was something I could achieve on my own. I wasn't asking for much, just enough to get started. Because of my direct refusal, Mr. Hayes and other relatives who were already against the marriage idea made sarcastic comments, accusing me of trying to cash in on their gratitude. At least he knows his place. How could a boy from the countryside ever dream of being with an elite woman raised in a century-old dynasty? Besides, everyone in New York knows Isabella and the heir to the Blackwood Group are childhood sweethearts. They're just waiting for him to graduate so they can announce their engagement. They're a perfect match, a true power couple. What is this country bumpkin who can't even tell a designer bag from a knockoff getting in the way? I never wanted to be in the way. Seeing that I had made up my mind, the matriarch agreed to arrange the funds and everything else for me after their summer gala. And then I would leave the Hayes family for good. On the night of the gala, the Hayes estate was lit up brightly. Mr. Hayes had invited many young socialites, with the Blackwood heir, Ethan, being the guest of honor, to a party in the back garden. I grabbed a glass of champagne, avoided the crowd, and found a quiet spot by the pool to look at the moon. Suddenly, a strong force shoved me from behind, and I fell into the water. I had grown up near a lake and was a good swimmer, but it happened so unexpectedly that my leg cramped up and I couldn't move. Just as I felt myself sinking, a dark figure jumped into the pool after me. I had swallowed some water and was starting to lose consciousness, but I instinctively clung to my rescuer, wrapping my arms and legs around them tightly. When my vision cleared, all I could see was a chest under a soaking, wet, clinging shirt. And then, the area was flooded with enough light to illuminate half the estate, surrounded by circles of men and women standing 3 deep. They said that because Isabella had saved me from drowning, her clothes were soaked through, which had damaged the reputation of a Hayes family heiress. But where I was from, everyone lived near the water. Swimming and playing in it was normal for both men and women. Our clothes were wet more often than they were dry. What did that have to with someone's reputation? The more I tried to explain, the more grim their expressions became. The matriarch then publicly announced that Isabella and I would be married in 3 days. I wasn't the only one who was completely shocked. The undisguised reactions on everyone's faces are still burned into my memory. Mr. Hayes was furious. The young socialites looked disgusted. The servants looked down on me with contempt. Ethan Blackwood's face was a mixture of many emotions: indignation, regret, heartbreak, despair, jealousy, and pure hatred. Only Isabella remained perfectly composed, her beautiful face a mask that revealed nothing at all. The proud hawk that soared in the sky had accidentally fallen into a mud puddle. At the time, the puddle was too naive to understand its own limitations. It foolishly thought it had captured the hawk, never imagining that its small world would be completely torn apart. The CEO's office was completely silent. I stood my ground, my head bowed slightly, perfectly still. "You..." Isabella seemed to be holding back her emotions, stopping after just one word. After a moment, she said in a heavy voice, "Is there anything you want to say to me?" Without looking up, I replied respectfully, "My son Sam is intelligent, loyal, and sensible. He has great potential, and I hope you will recognize that and give him a chance, Madam Chairwoman." "We've been divorced for 3 years, and yet Sam is already 9 years old." Isabella's voice was as cold and still as a frozen lake. Is he your stepson?" She was always so composed, able to conceal even the most intense anger without a single change in her expression. But in that one, lightly asked question, I could hear the suppressed danger and tension. After thinking for a moment, I answered truthfully, "Not my stepson. Sam is my adopted son." After a long pause, Isabella let out a soft, her tone softening just slightly. "Since he's your adopted son, he has a connection to me as well. I should, of course." "Madam Chairwoman," I gently interrupted her and slowly lifted my head to look her in the eyes. "Sam has nothing to do with you, and neither do I." Back in my small hometown, I finally pursued the life I had always wanted and became a community doctor. My medical skills were excellent. I could handle all kinds of emergency situations and respond to sudden medical problems. Over time, I began to build a good reputation in the surrounding towns. After I came back from New York, I was so focused on my work that I had no time for anything else. Emergency patients, critical cases, and a bad flu season meant I had more patients than I could handle. On another weekend, Sam came home. He had pulled 2 all-nighters, researching different universities, studying his subjects, and preparing over a dozen different sets of study notes. I found a quiet moment to ask him if Isabella had caused him any trouble. "No, she just kept asking me questions about you," Sam said, looking at me. "Are you 2 old acquaintances?" I lowered my eyes and gave a quiet, "Yes." Sam asked again, "You don't like her?" After I gave another affirmative answer, Sam nodded. "I understand." After that, Sam never brought up Isabella's name again. Another 2 weeks went by peacefully. The next time I saw Isabella, her luxury SUV was causing a commotion in our small town. Sam jumped out of the car with a cold look on his face, followed by an assistant who set up a high-end folding chair next to the vehicle. Isabella got out with our 2 children. They were a pair of twins with beautiful, delicate features. Their looks were striking, but they didn't resemble me at all, having inherited all of Isabella's good looks. "Dad!" Sam ran over to me, standing in front of me as if to shield me. I noticed red marks on his wrist from where he had been grabbed, and a sharp sense of protectiveness went through me. Isabella looked at me, then whispered to the twins, "Go on." The twins were hesitant, but obediently walked toward me, and I just felt a cold chill run through my body, making me tremble uncontrollably. It wasn't that I hadn't tried to be a loving father. I once snuck into the garden of their mansion in the middle of a winter night to build 4 snowmen so they would see them the moment they woke up. A family of 4, with parents and children. When my daughter had a persistent high fever that no medicine could break, I didn't hesitate to offer my own blood for a transfusion, blindly believing in the ridiculous theory that the blood of a close relative had special healing properties. I can still remember how I desperately held on to the butler's sleeve, refusing to let go as they were forcibly taken away from me. "Someone of your background, how could you possibly raise them properly? The matriarch will raise them herself. You have no right to object. Besides, you're their biological father. They'll naturally feel close to you when they get older." But when they did get older, not only did they not grow close to me, they were cruel to me. A bodyguard and a driver at the mansion got into a private fight. Afraid they would be fired, they hid their injuries until I happened to find one of them, his wound infected and festering. He went into shock right there. It was a life-or-death situation. How could I just stand there and do nothing? I gave him emergency medical treatment. Just as I finished stitching up the wound, the garage door was kicked open. Mr. Hayes was furious. He ordered the family's disciplinary whip and had me flogged 10 times in front of all the staff. My back was a mess of torn skin and blood. I lay on the ground, drenched in a cold sweat from the pain, feeling completely humiliated. My daughter clung to her grandmother's waist, refusing to even look in my direction. My son pointed at me, his face filled with resentment, and said, You've degraded yourself and brought shame on our entire family. You don't deserve to be my father." "Dad." The twins stood in front of me and called out my name, their heads bowed. "I think you have the wrong person, miss, young master," I said with a forced smile, humbly lowering my head. "I'm just an ordinary doctor. How could I possibly be worthy of being your father? I hadn't done anything wrong. Even if that bodyguard was a troublemaking servant, and even if treating injuries was a job for professional doctors, I still hadn't done anything wrong." Isabella's grand arrival completely disrupted the peaceful life Sam and I had built. After they left, the neighbors wouldn't stop asking who that stunning female CEO was and who that adorable pair of twins were. I thought for a moment, and then told them, "I am the father of those twins." I didn't know why Isabella had brought the children all this way to see me, and I didn't want to try and guess. It just didn't matter anymore. 2 pregnant women in the neighborhood were due to give birth soon and had made arrangements with me beforehand. Hemostatic drugs, prenatal supplements, blood tonics, sterile cloths, scissors, needles, and thread. After checking everything 3 times, I carefully went over their prenatal records again, considering every possible complication that could arise. This was what deserved my full attention. Isabella enrolled her son and daughter in the best private school in town, which made them classmates with Sam. No matter how good that school was, it was still just a local private school. How could it possibly risk offending the children of a corporate CEO? Within a few days, the principal announced a school-wide break for campus renovations. Isabella once again drove Sam home. This time, she didn't just stare at me from inside her car. She walked right up to me and said in a low voice, "Clara is sick. She wants to see you." I looked at the girl. Her face was a little pale, and she was wrapped in an exquisite shawl despite the summer heat. I remained unmoved. "If she's sick, she should go back to the city to see a doctor or find a specialist at a hospital. It's getting late. You should all be heading back." I called Sam's name and turned to go inside. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my wrist. Isabella gritted her teeth. "Clara is your flesh and blood, too." Her words were like a signal. Clara walked quickly toward me, each step poised and elegant, her skirt swaying gently without revealing the tips of her shoes. She hugged my waist, pressed her feverish face against my chest, and whimpered softly, "Daddy, I don't feel good." In the end, Clara and Miles stayed. I could never turn my back on a life that was in need, especially not a child's. Clara lay on the bed, wrapped in an expensive fur coat, refusing to let any part of her body touch the old, worn bedsheet. The position looked incredibly uncomfortable, but she was insistent, so I didn't push the issue. After examining her, I told Isabella that Clara was just having trouble adjusting to the new environment. "You should go back to New York as soon as you can. The company still has important business to attend to," Isabella said in a low voice. "The corporation is still in the process of selecting a new batch of management trainees." I let out a soft, "Oh," and said, "Then you should finish the selection process quickly so you can go back sooner." Isabella's fists clenched. She suddenly looked at me. "When you say, 'finish the selection process quickly,' you're plotting something for your adopted son. When you say, 'go back sooner,' you're trying to get rid of us, aren't you?" I nodded once. "Yes." Isabella seemed exasperated. "Do you even see me? Our children?" "Not ours," I said calmly. "Yours, Clara Hayes. Miles Hayes. Mother, Isabella Hayes. Raised by the Hayes family matriarch. They have no relation to Leo Miller." Leo Miller was done with them. Isabella's face instantly went pale, her thin lips trembling as she murmured, "We're only divorced. Just divorced. You're still their father. They are still our children." Before I could say no, Isabella stumbled back 3 steps, turned around, and hurried away. I watched her retreating figure, a picture of devastation that I had never seen on her before. It turned out that the same word could have different levels of intensity. Isabella's devastation was an unsteady walk, while my devastation had been a complete and utter wreck of a person. Which time was it? Was it shortly after we were married, when I overheard Isabella telling her best friend, "Marrying Leo Miller was not my choice. I had planned to marry an heir from another powerful family to form a strategic alliance. My mother used his reputation to pressure me. I didn't care about that, but if I didn't agree to marry him, it would have damaged the company's public image. After weighing the pros and cons, I had to agree." Or was it when she threw the 4-course meal I had spent hours preparing for her into the trash and coldly scolded me, "You should act like the husband of a wealthy family. Stop busying yourself with such trivial matters." Or maybe it was after she publicly humiliated me, looking at me with cold indifference and saying, "Debasing yourself with such absurd behavior. How are you fit to be the husband of the Hayes Corporation's CEO? There were too many moments. Devastated? Back then, I was just a walking corpse. I had no soul left to be devastated. After Isabella left, I made a pot of lotus root and pork rib soup. I left Sam to look after the twins and took my medical kit to the community center. The delivery went relatively smoothly. The mother was in labor for about 2 hours, with minimal blood loss and only a slight tear, successfully giving birth. Of all the births I had assisted with, this was one of the better ones. When I got back to my apartment, I could hear arguing from inside. The first voice I heard was Miles's, full of anger. "You think we want to be here? If Mom hadn't forced us, who would want to come to a dump like this?" Clara chimed in angrily. "Who do you think you are to tell us to leave? You're just a country bumpkin, a dirty—" Miles finished her sentence. "Low-class peasant. He seduced our mom, and now I'm forced to leave my international school for this hellhole. It's all his fault." Clara started sobbing. "I miss Grandma. I want to go home." I looked down and touched my chest. In the past, just seeing them from a distance would have filled me with joy. Now, I felt strangely calm, as if I had fallen into a deep sleep or had already died. I deliberately made some noise as I approached, and the apartment fell silent. When I opened the door, the 3 children were sitting at the dining table, a bowl of lotus root soup in front of each of them. Perhaps realizing I had overheard their conversation, the twins' expressions were strange. "Dad?" Sam stood up and took the heavy medical kit from me. When I came back after washing my hands, another bowl of soup was on the table for me. After I sat down, a piece of pork rib was added to my bowl, and Sam took a piece of lotus root from mine. I smiled. "Mrs. Davis had a baby girl." Sam nodded. "Last week when I went to the mall with Mr. Davis, he had a feeling it would be a girl. He said he wanted to buy a bunch of princess dresses for his little princess. He gave me a lot of gifts as a thank you. I'll have Mrs. Miller buy you some new clothes tomorrow," I said. "Dad, let's just forget it, okay?" Sam sighed. Sam and I were just making small talk, but something we said seemed to trigger the twins. Mason slammed his hand on the table and stood up, looking me straight in the eye. "I know you heard me." Before I could say anything, Mason jutted out his chin and said, "I don't care if you heard me. You and Mom were never a good match. Because of your low-class background, we don't have a powerful family on our mother's side to rely on. In the future, when my sister gets married and I enter the business world, people are going to look down on us because of you." I put a hand on Sam's arm to stop him from lunging forward, then looked calmly at the twins and asked softly, "If it weren't for me, where would you be?" Miles and Clara froze at the same time. Later that evening, Isabella came to pick up the twins. Before we could exchange a single word, someone ran up to us in a hurry. "Dr. Miller, it's Grace. She just fell and she's bleeding a lot." I was about to turn and call for help when Sam ran over, holding the medical kit in one hand and his phone with the flashlight on in the other. "It's getting dark. I'll go with you, Dad." Isabella stepped in front of us, reaching for Sam. "Give me the medical kit." Sam looked at her warily. Isabella looked at me, her dark eyes like an abyss. "I'll drive you. It'll be faster." Without a moment of hesitation, I took the medical kit and phone and walked toward Isabella's luxury car. In the car, I quickly reviewed Grace's medical records on my phone. The space around me suddenly brightened. Isabella had turned on the interior lights. I ignored her gesture, my mind completely focused on the medical file. "Thirsty?" Isabella asked suddenly. "There's water. It's the lotus leaf tea you like." "Not thirsty," I replied flatly, without looking up. A moment later, Isabella asked again, "Hungry? There are some pastries. Lotus seed your favorite?" "Not hungry," I said, still staring at my phone screen. After another moment, Isabella began, "It's hot." "Can you please be quiet?" My brow furrowed, and I looked up. Seeing it was Isabella, I paused for a second. "This is a matter of life and death. Please don't distract me." Grace's pregnancy had been difficult from the start. Her morning sickness was worse than most. She was swollen all over, had trouble breathing, and by the 7th month, her vision had started to blur. She had finally made it to her due date, just waiting for the baby to arrive, only for this accident to happen. Grace's husband seemed to have a bad feeling. His rough fingers gripped my wrist tightly. "Save the baby. I'm begging you. My wife can die. It doesn't matter, but the baby absolutely cannot have anything happen to it." I emotionlessly pulled his hand away and said calmly, "I can't save the baby. The only one who can save the baby is your wife. If she lives, the child can be born. If she dies, it's 2 lives lost." From the delivery room, I could hear the sound of Grace gritting her teeth, straining in pain. My hands had been sterilized 3 times, but my clothes were still stained with a bit of blood, and I inevitably smelled of disinfectant. When I walked out of Grace's house, Isabella was waiting by her luxury SUV. Night had fallen, and the streetlights cast a dim, yellow glow. I used to wait for her like this, all alone, waiting for her to come home with me. The Hayes Corporation headquarters was massive. It was a 15-minute drive from the West Wing, where we lived, to the East Wing, where the old chairman and matriarch resided. Every day after work, she would go to the East Wing to report to the old chairman. Worried that she would be working late, I would prepare a late-night snack and drive to pick her up. At first, I was allowed to wait for her in the East Wing lobby. Later, she told me not to enter the building, so I waited in the parking lot. Eventually, she forbade me from waiting for her at all. "There are so many people at the company to serve me. Father will prepare those things for me. If you have nothing better to do, just don't come to headquarters." The words still echoed in my ears. Standing a few feet away from her, I gave a slight nod. "Thank you for the ride, Miss Hayes." "We were once married. There's no need to be so distant," she said, avoiding my gaze and stepping aside. "Get in." "No, thank you." I looked at her and said softly, "I've just assisted with a birth. I'm not very clean. I shouldn't get in your car." I turned and started walking toward the nearby taxi stand. The path was lined with the walls of a high-end residential community, with the faint silhouettes of trees visible inside. It was early autumn, and the leaves were starting to turn yellow. Though there was a sense of decay in the air, I felt no regret. Nature is cyclical. The leaves that fall this year will be replaced by lush greenery next spring. It was nothing like the meticulously manicured artificial lake at the Hayes estate. No matter how much I tended to it, the lotuses bloomed less and less. The leaves grew sparser and sparser until the vast surface of the lake had only one last flower left, which I took with me when I left. I heard footsteps behind me. I stopped and turned to face Isabella. She still looked impeccable in her custom-tailored suit, but her expensive, handmade Italian leather shoes looked out of place on the muddy suburban path. Once it was me and her, now it was her and me. "Isabella," I finally said her name. After a moment of shock, Isabella's eyes lit up, her voice filled with an unconcealed excitement. "You!" I cut her off. "Bringing the children here to see me, what is this really all about?" Isabella was silent for a moment before speaking. "There have been many misunderstandings between us. I hope you'll come back with me so we can be a family again." I tilted my head slightly, watching her without a word. Isabella, who was usually so reserved, was now uncharacteristically talkative. "I was born lacking in emotion. It was never my intention to be so cold to you. In my dealings with people, I can calculate the costs and benefits clearly. But with you, I lost that ability. I didn't know how to be good to you, nor did I know what the right thing to do was. It won't be like that anymore, Leo. I understand my own heart now." Isabella could no longer hold back her emotions. Her lips pressed together tightly, and she finally said it. "I love you." My gaze lingered on her face, and I watched her, lost in thought for a moment. If this were the past, forget about such a confession. Even a single glance from Isabella would have made my heart race. But now, I found that my heart was surprisingly calm. "Leo," Isabella said, stepping closer and taking my hand. "I never remarried. My heart has always been yours." I looked down at our clasped hands and suddenly asked, "Would you be willing to stay here for me? To resign from the corporation?" Isabella froze. She wouldn't. I could see it in her eyes. My expression was calm, almost serene. "You say there were many misunderstandings between us. I know all about that. But I also understand that in your heart, the Hayes Corporation, your family's power, is more important than I am. That's why, when we were engaged, you wanted to marry an heir for a strategic alliance. After we were married, you remained ambiguously close with him. Do you know when I decided I would never look back? It wasn't when your father said he wanted me to be a kept man, and you quietly agreed. It wasn't when I asked for a divorce and you agreed without a moment's hesitation. It was when I saw the blueprints for the mansion you designed when you were 26, the one you planned to build to marry that man. After Isabella and I filed for divorce, there was a 15-day waiting period to get the certificate. But the very next day, Isabella was sent abroad on company business. My status at that time was incredibly awkward. I was no longer Isabella's husband, but I wasn't yet a complete stranger. I had planned to move out of the master bedroom, but a large crew of construction workers suddenly arrived. "You don't have to move," Mr. Hayes' assistant told me with a fake smile. "A man of his status would never sleep in a room you've slept in. Besides, when Miss Hayes was 26, she personally designed a mansion to marry him. Every brick, every blade of grass was carefully considered. That is the place Miss Hayes is meant to live." The Hayes family had deep pockets. They filled in half of the back garden and built a high-rise building from the ground up. I stood in the courtyard and watched that building go from nothing to something, from low to high, extravagantly decorated and dazzling. In that moment, I could no longer deceive myself. No matter how many nourishing soups I prepared for her, no matter how many custom suits I picked out for her, I was still just an unexpected detour in her life. This mansion did not belong to me, and neither did Isabella. "You gave me 5 years of marriage and never remarried, and you had feelings for me. That's true. You tacitly allowed the rumors of your affair with Ethan Blackwood to spread, tying the Hayes Corporation to the Blackwood family's power. That's also true. You want me to come back to the estate to reconcile with you. That's true, but you're not willing to give up your family's business for me. That's also true." I gave a bitter smile and said softly, "You're shrewd and decisive. You must know that you can't have both me and the Hayes Corporation, and you won't choose me." "Leo," Isabella's voice was hoarse. The usually calm and composed CEO now seemed fragile and vulnerable. I didn't understand my heart back then, and I wronged you. I'll talk to my father. He won't give you any more trouble. The people at the corporation will respect you. We can be a loving couple. This has nothing to do with the Hayes Corporation. Why must you— I knew it, I sighed softly. You won't choose me. Isabella froze, instinctively letting go of my hand. Isabella, you have your brilliant career, and I have my own life's pursuit. It may be ordinary, but I'm content with it. Some flowers are born in the mud and bloom in the wild. Some cranes are bathed in glory and remain untouched by dust. The flowers bloom everywhere. The cranes soar to the heavens. You and I were fated to meet, but not to be together. For the rest of the way, I used my phone as a flashlight, and Isabella used hers. We walked the final stretch in silence. When I saw the gate to my apartment building, my sleeve was suddenly tugged. Isabella's fingers were trembling slightly, unable to stay still. She murmured in a low voice, I love you. I was just— late. Not late. I pulled my sleeve back and said flatly, wrong. If it weren't for that night, I would still be me, and she would still be her, each in our own place, each at peace. Sam and the twins didn't fight again, but the twins looked at Sam with eyes that were red with something that looked like hatred. Before getting into the car, Isabella looked deeply at me. I'll be back to see you. Don't, I said. I don't want to see you again, and I don't want to see them either. The twins' gazes immediately turned on me, filled with the same animosity they had for Sam. Isabella was silent for a moment before getting into the car with the two children. As the luxury car slowly drove away, Sam squeezed my hand and said in a low voice, Dad, I was wrong. What? I looked down at him. Sam pressed his soft lips together, then said quietly after a moment, They kept insulting you, and I couldn't take it anymore. I put a spoonful of bitter melon powder in their soup. Bitter melon powder is incredibly bitter. One sip and you can't speak for a while. Sam looked remorseful. They're your children, Dad. I shouldn't have— Aren't you my only child? I smiled at him. After smiling, I couldn't help but sigh. But your chances of getting into that top-tier school are probably gone now. I don't want to go to a top-tier school. Sam looked up at me, his eyes crystal clear. I've already decided to apply to the local university. With the principal's recommendation, the admissions team will be coming to visit soon. As good as the local university was, it couldn't compare to the elite universities in the capital, and Sam had the talent to get in. Between my dad's love and a shortcut to success, Sam said, his eyes curving into a smile. I'll always choose my dad. Soon after, Sam started at the local university. The following year, when he came home for a visit, he brought a lotus flower he had found outside the courtyard gate. Someone must have picked it from the campus lake for fun and just threw it away, Sam said, handing me the flower. The flower was just about to bloom. I found a glass bottle and put it in water. That lotus flower stayed in bloom past the autumn equinox. In the years that followed, a new flower appeared every year. But I never saw the person who picked it and left it there. Epilogue. Isabella was the eldest daughter of the Hayes family matriarch, born with striking looks and a cool, self-possessed demeanor. She never made a misstep in her personal or professional life. Her every move was a calculated part of a long-term strategy: how to build her reputation, how to establish her authority, and even how to use marriage to consolidate her power. Isabella had a plan for everything. At 24, she set her sights on the Blackwood Group. At 25, just as she had planned, she had a chance encounter with the Blackwood heir, Ethan, and won his heart. At 26, she personally designed their future home. According to her plan, Ethan would eventually see the blueprints and, upon seeing them, would be utterly devoted to her, willing to do anything. However, she never expected a man named Leo Miller to show up at her door. The man carried a simple backpack, but in his arms he held a fresh lotus flower. He said shyly that he had no valuable gifts and didn't want to arrive empty-handed, so he had picked a flower from the lotus pond in the park outside the city as a small token. Her mother promised him marriage. Isabella was against it from the bottom of her heart, but she didn't show it. She was the model of a business elite, and filial piety was paramount. Her parents' wishes were all important. She could see that from their very first meeting. Leo's ears turned red. It was love at first sight. This only made her more frustrated. If she didn't marry Ethan Blackwood and instead married an ordinary man, her career path would become much more difficult. But to her utter astonishment, Leo refused. Leo was clearly smitten with her, yet he wanted startup capital, not her? That was unexpected. Not only that, but after politely declining the marriage, Leo started to deliberately avoid her. Isabella assumed that with her status and beauty, no man could possibly reject her. Leo's avoidance was surely just him playing hard to get. Later, Isabella discovered that wasn't the case. Leo was genuinely avoiding her. Leo came from an ordinary background and was always doing foolish things that were beneath his station. He actually wore shorts and went wading in the estate's artificial lake to catch fish. He held the wriggling fish, his eyes filled with a smile as bright as the stars. It was utterly absurd. Even late at night, a man who married into a wealthy family shouldn't behave so improperly. His strong, slender legs glistened in the moonlight. What if someone saw? At the very least, in the dead of night, she had seen him. What annoyed her even more was that he cooked those fish into a delicious feast, which all the company executives got to enjoy, except for her. Isabella wasn't angry. She just felt a tightness in her chest. On the night of the summer gala, Isabella was supposed to be at a reception with Ethan Blackwood, but on a whim, she started following Leo. Leo sat on a bench by the lake, eating mooncakes and smiling to himself. Tomorrow he would be moving out of the estate, yet here he was, smiling. Isabella nearly snapped the fountain pen in her hand. Just then, she saw Ethan Blackwood's assistant stealthily approaching Leo. Isabella saw the assistant's intent at once. She could have called out to stop him, sent a quick text to warn Leo, or simply ignored it. But in that split second, she made the most outrageous choice of her life. After marrying Leo, Isabella didn't know how to act around him. This was not part of her plan. She could only act according to her nature, cool and detached. When a business partner asked her how newlywed life was, she certainly wasn't going to tell the truth about that night, so she feigned indifference and said things she didn't mean. When she found out she was pregnant, she was ecstatic. She and Leo truly shared a blood connection, but at the same time she realized something was wrong. Ethan Blackwood, unwilling to give up, had conspired with her father to have her drugged. The drug could cause a woman to carry multiple fetuses. If she died during childbirth, they could sacrifice her to save the babies, and their wishes would be fulfilled. The matter involved the Blackwood group. She couldn't speak of it to anyone, so she found an excuse and asked Leo to take her to get an abortion. But Leo was stubborn. Her mother disagreed, and Ethan Blackwood interfered, having her sent to an overseas branch. In the end, she risked her life to give birth to twins, but it damaged her health. She needed careful recuperation, or she would suffer permanent health problems. So she agreed to let her mother raise the children. But Leo didn't know any of this. In the dead of winter, he snuck into the children's nursery to record videos for them. Out in the freezing snow, was he trying to get himself killed? She was so angry she deleted his videos and warned him never to be so reckless again. Leo's status was already a point of contention. If he wasn't careful, and Ethan and her father found something to use against him, his situation would become even more difficult. But he insisted on treating a bodyguard's wound. Giving people ammunition against him, how would he get out of that? She had originally thought she would let her father teach him a small lesson so he would learn his place. But she never expected her father to humiliate him so publicly, without a shred of dignity. When she rushed back to the estate, she saw his pale face. The tears in his eyes felt like a knife twisting in her heart. But then she thought, with him acting like this, wasn't he afraid of being caught and used as leverage to threaten their marriage? The harsh words of a lesson tumbled out of her mouth. Isabella didn't want Leo to leave her, but he still drifted further and further away. It was hard to say when their relationship changed, but Leo no longer looked at her with love in his eyes. She noticed Leo getting friendlier with a young female doctor. One day she found dozens of emails on Leo's laptop. When she opened them, they were filled with what she thought were obscene anatomical diagrams of male genitalia. All of these emails were from that female doctor. For Leo, she had given up a strategic alliance she had planned for years, and this was how he repaid her. Isabella was panicked, furious, angry, and resentful. So, when Leo asked for a divorce, she didn't even think. She just said coldly, "Fine." From then on, they went their separate ways, like strangers,